morning, class. Welcome to the 2022 presentation or contact class for Agricultural Education 3, BES AGE42. My name is Eric Ukule and I'll be your tutor for this module. Should you have any questions, whether related to this presentation or whether it is related to the course as a whole, please do contact me via cell phone on 081 2206-900. Otherwise, you can also reach me via email on ericokule@gmail.com. This can now be done between the hours of 6 and 8 p.m. Okay, so welcome to Agricultural Education 3. I wish you all to be hardworking, dedicated, and self-driven students throughout the course of this module. Okay, so this presentation is going to cover the subject content in brief, as well as offer some general guidelines that I want everyone to keep in mind when preparing for the 2022 Agricultural Education 3 examination. Okay, I will be discussing some of the content in your study guide in order to help you to prepare for the coming examinations. By now, you would have had an idea about what Agricultural Education 3 is all about because you have completed an assignment by now. So please note that I will not be able to give attention to the whole content. So should you have any questions, please do contact me for help or for clarification on anything that you might be struggling with on the details that I've provided on the second slide of this presentation. Okay, so the presentation will highlight some important aspects and units of this module. So you should use the study guide, this presentation, as well as the assignment when preparing for your examinations. Okay, so starting off with the first unit, which deals with the general issues in agriculture. Okay, so what are the possible business opportunities based on agricultural products as well as activities? Okay, so the first thing to do when one wants to explore business opportunities is to have an idea. Okay, and in agriculture, we have to look at opportunities in crop production, livestock production, transport, input supply, and in agro industry. So the first opportunity to be taken advantage of is increasing productivity. Okay, so when farmers increase productivity per unit area and per unit time, and they produce beyond subsistence means, then they will realize that they have a surplus, and this continues to the next slide. They will realize that they have a surplus, and as a result, they can generate some income. Okay, so another issue or another way of making money in agriculture is through value addition. That is where the money in agriculture is. Okay, so although value to primary goods offers a major income opportunity for Namibia, value addition offers farmers a real opportunity to increase their incomes, because with value addition, the higher you go up the value chain, the more money you stand to generate for your enterprise. Okay, so one important point to make is that domestic and retail markets have become increasingly advanced, especially in the urban centers, in terms of consumer goods, and this offers some enterprising farmers an opportunity to make significant economic gains on raw materials through value addition. So instead of selling someone or a whole carcass, you must add some value, cut it up into different cuts, make some biltong. That is where the money is. Okay, so other opportunities of making money in agriculture. Okay, there is value addition. There are also other opportunities, which is capitalizing on health and safety issues. Okay, taking advantage of food consumption, studying and analyzing the market chains. So these are also some of the opportunities where one can make some money in agriculture or can venture into if they want to get into agribusiness. Okay, so there is value addition, capitalizing on health and safety issues, taking advantage of food consumption, and studying and analyzing the market chain. Okay, so how important is agriculture now to the Namibian economy? Okay, so it's a provider of food. Okay, when it comes to agriculture in the Namibian economy, it provides about 39% and 19% to the total maize and wheat consumption requirements of Namibia, respectively. Okay, and it supplies about 100% of the total beef, mutton, and pear millet consumption. Although with pear millet nowadays, because there is value addition happening to it, we find it now in the supermarkets. We are now in a situation where we still have to import some pear millet from countries such as India. But we are also, at least locally, able to produce much of the needed pear millet. Okay, agriculture is important for our economy in that it provides employment and it provides incomes. Okay, so continuing with the importance of agriculture to the economy, it provides foreign exchange in the economy. Okay, so for example, in the year 2004, the agricultural sector accounted for 11.5% of the total foreign exchange earnings of the country. Okay, so agriculture further creates demand for capital investments and increases the productivity of workers. Okay, it supports other sectors such as transport, manufacturing, plastic packaging, and several other manufacturing sectors. Okay, so the agricultural sector sustains about 70% of the Namibian population, either directly or indirectly. Or it also contributes on average of 2% to the total manufacturing output of Namibia. Okay, so continuing with general issues in agriculture, now you are involved in an agricultural enterprise. How do you provide good customer service, or what is good customer service? Okay, so good customer service means now that you must have the correct knowledge of the products that you are selling. Okay, so good customer service means you must have the correct knowledge of the products that you are selling. You should also have a good experience with your products. And in the process, you should be able to help customers make the best choices when they want to buy any of your products, because now you have the correct knowledge. It's based on your products. So good customer service also involves treating customers with friendly and helpful attitude. You should be friendly and you should come off as a helpful individual. So the customer service you offer should be efficiently provided in a friendly and respectful manner, because you would want these customers to come back to you, to come back for your service some other time. So you need to be respectful and friendly. Okay, so continuing, what are now some of the dangers of wrong agricultural practices on the productivity of soil or land? Okay, if you are not doing it right, what are the possible implications? Okay, so wrong activities, okay, that loosen the soil and leave it vulnerable to water runoff and wind to cause soil erosion and land degradation. Wrong agricultural practices, together with excessive use of agricultural chemicals, makes the soil lose its productivity. Okay, so wrong agricultural practices, they are any activities that loosen the soil and leave it vulnerable to water runoff and wind to cause soil erosion and land degradation, and together with excessive use of agricultural chemicals, they might lead to the loss of soil productivity. Okay, so how now do you protect the soil productivity and control erosion. So soil erosion removes valuable topsoil, which is the most productive part of the soil profile. Okay, but once it's removed, now some of our plants will not be able to grow well, etc. Okay, so how do we control it? So the main strategies of controlling soil productivity, mainly through controlling erosion, are using the land in accordance with its capability. So if you are farming with animals, you must pay attention to the carrying capacity of your camps, for example. So you should use the land in accordance with its capability. Another way is to protect the soil surface with some form of cover, control runoff before it develops into an erosive forces. Okay, so these are the main strategies of controlling soil productivity, mainly now through the control of erosion. Use the land in accordance to its capabilities, protect the soil surface with some form of cover, control runoff before it develops into an erosive force. Okay, so continuing with general issues in agriculture, there are also the issues of first aid. Okay, so what are the first aid procedures on the farm? So as a farm owner, or farm owners and managers, as well as family members working on a farm, should at least receive basic first aid training, because most of the time these farms are far from the nearest hospital, so there should at least be that one individual or two that have received basic first aid training. So the most important thing to have on the farm is a basic first aid kit supplied by a reputable organization. Okay. So first aid kits should contain all the items as listed on page 22 of your study guide. So for a first aid kit to be proper, to be considered complete, there's a list of items that need to be contained in this first aid kit, and these are given on page 22 of your study guide. So please do get familiar with what items are required to be part of your first aid kit. Okay. Staying on the issues in agriculture, there is also the issue of HIV and AIDS. So what are the effects of HIV and AIDS on family and agricultural production? So HIV and AIDS affects the most productive segments of the labor force. Okay, so these are the youth mostly. Okay, and these are the people that are productive. Okay, so it leads to decline in productivity, and as a result, it may result in, or it may lead to child labor, because now these productive segment of the labor force, which are mostly the youth, are no longer capable of doing anything because they are suffering maybe from HIV, they are somewhere in bed, so that might lead to child labor. Okay, so but these details are provided in more details on page 24 of your study guide, so please do make sure to visit that page. Okay, so since we are studying agriculture education to be able to pass it on to our learners later on, okay, so there are several learning styles that we need to know. Okay, so we encounter different types of learners. So you would find visual learners. So these are learners who generally think in terms of pictures. Okay, then you also have auditory learners. So these ones are generally those that learn best by listening to the teacher. Then you have kinesthetic learners. Okay, so these are the learners that learn best through touching, feeling, and experiencing what they are trying to learn. Okay, so you need to learn more on these learning styles on page 28 of your study guide. Okay, so moving on to the next unit, which is the different aspects on plant production. Okay, so when it comes to plant production, one needs to select a suitable place for planting different plants. Okay, so therefore, when it comes to selecting such a place, it should be one that is near a source of input materials. It should be well served with a reliable source of water inside the nursery. It should be protected by windbreaks, and it should also be well shaded. Okay, so when selecting a suitable for planting different plants, that place should be near a source of input materials. It should be well served with a reliable source of water inside the nursery. It should be protected by windbreaks, and it should also have sufficient shade. Okay, so moving on with plant production. What are the different types of wild plants in terms of their adaptation to the environment? Okay, so wild plants are native to the area, or they are considered indigenous plants because they are in their natural habitat and they are well adapted to all the environmental factors. Okay, so plants that are not native, they would be referred to as exotic species, okay, or introduced species, or sometimes they will be called alien species. Okay, so continuing with plant production. So the next discussion is on the economic value of maintenance of equipment and tools. Okay, so the best thing to do when it comes to the maintenance of tools is to implement preventive maintenance. Okay, so maintenance ensures that the equipment performs better. And the best way to look at the economic value of maintaining equipment is to develop a simple financial model that clearly determines the value of preventive maintenance. And this can be done by identifying costs such as actual costs, cost of repair, cost of replacing equipment, etc. Okay, and more details on how to go about it are provided on pages 46 to 48 of your Agricultural Education 3 study guides. Okay, continuing, the next discussion is on the Namibian vegetation zones. Okay, so we have tropical forests and wetlands along the banks of the perennial rivers such as the Kavango and Zambezi River. We have the savanna plains with occasional trees in the Kalahari. We have mountainous escarpment regions such as Kaokoland and Damaraland. We also have low altitude coastland and the Namib Desert. So these are the different vegetation zones that we have in Namibia. Okay, so continuing with plant production, then there is the issue of plant nutrients. Okay, so from Agricultural Education 1, we learned that these are classified into two groups, major and minor nutrients, or micro and macronutrients. Okay? So plant nutrients basically are substances or chemicals or elements that are needed for plant life processes to occur normally. Okay? So they are needed for plant life processes to occur normally. Okay? So the various nutrients that plants need are, we have our major nutrients, such as carbon dioxide, hydrogen, sodium and other chlorides, sulfur, nitrogen, and water. We also have minor nutrients. So these include things like iron, zinc, copper, selenium. Okay? So it's important now to you as the student to study the functions of these plant nutrients, and you can find them on pages 59 to 60 of your study guide. Okay, still staying on the plant production, what are the best management practices for supplying organic and inorganic nutrients to plants? Okay, so the best way, or the best management practices. So too much supply of nutrients is a waste and can also cause toxicity and kill the plant. Okay, so that saying of saying too much of anything can be harmful. It also applies to plants. So too much supply of nutrients You would think that you are helping your plants grow, but it's a waste, and it can also lead to toxicity that can result in the death of your plants. Okay, so on the other hand, inadequate or imbalanced or poorly timed and inappropriate use of nutrients can also create many problems. Okay, so first you lose productivity of the plant, and this may cause negative environmental and economic as well as social impact. So you need to find a balance. Okay, you don't need to use too much nutrients. You also need to, they should also not be inadequate. So they should be supplied in the correct amount, otherwise it can cause many problems that can be economic, social, or environmental. Okay, so still staying on plant production, we are now going to discuss the common plant diseases. Okay, so although we strive to have healthy plants, it's not usually the case. Some of the common plant diseases we may encounter include powdery mildew, black spot, damping off, rust, and wilt. Okay, so on pages 63 to 65, I need you guys to read up on the symptoms, causative agents, and how to remedy some of the plant diseases that are listed above. So if you have black spot, what causes black spot? Okay, how do you identify now that this plant is suffering from black spots? What are the symptoms? Okay, how do you treat or how do you remedy that situation? All those details are given on pages 63 to 65 of your study guide. Okay, how do diseases and pests damage garden plants? Okay, so plant diseases and pests affect plants by destroying plant structures, reducing the leaf surface area that is needed for photosynthesis. They may cause blockages of the stomata, hence interfering with gaseous exchange of desirable plants. There can be a loss of cell sap as it's sucked out by these pests. Okay, pests can create openings for infection by bacteria, fungi, and viruses. The phloem and the xylem vessels are damaged, and hence circulation of plant fluids is also affected. Okay, so this is caused by the action of pests. Diseases and pests also reduce plant vigor, and some plants become stunted and twisted as a result of either diseases or pest infestation. Okay, continuing, so management functions of a manager. Okay, so what are the management functions of a manager? Okay, so a manager plays the following management functions within a business. Okay, so a manager is responsible for planning, organizing, directing, staffing, and controlling. Okay, so those are some of the functions where a manager plays a key role within a business. So they plan, they organize, they direct, they are responsible for the staff, as well as they control the operations of the enterprise. Okay, so it's important now that you read more on the specific roles of a manager under the management functions listed above. So pages 78 to 79 of your study guide covers this. How is a manager responsible for planning, for example? It's detailed on page 78 to 79 of your study guide. So once again, please do visit those pages and get familiar with the details of how the managers perform those functions of planning, organizing, staffing, directing, and controlling. Okay, so the economic situation. So now we are moving on to the next unit, which is the different aspects of sheep, goat farming, and marketing. Okay, so what is the economic importance of keeping sheep and goats? Okay, so sheep and goats play a role in food and economic security, mainly because their meat is cheaper, and when it comes to goats, goat milk has many advantages. Okay. So more information on the contribution of sheep and goats to food and economic security is shared with you on pages 100 to 101 of your study guide. So please do brush up on those details or get that information from those pages in your study guide. Okay. So continuing, the importance of good planning and management in animal production. Okay, so good planning and management aims to maximize animal production, parameters being effectiveness and efficiency. Is your enterprise efficiency? You are efficient. Okay? So good planning and management creates a body of knowledge that supports the good control of livestock. Good planning and management allows for the institution of biosecurity measures on livestock. Observation and evaluation should be routine and continuously operating according to predefined management schedules. Okay, this is particularly important for early detection of problems such as feed shortages, feed poisoning, as well as diseases and pest outbreaks. Okay, so once again, it's important to note that this is a brief presentation. So the information that is presented above or in this slide is a brief summary of the importance of planning and management. So the full discussion on this aspect is highlighted on pages 102 to 103 of your study guide. So make sure that you go through them and that you understand everything that is there. Okay. So we move on to keeping records of animals kept on school grounds. Maybe your school is keeping some chickens. Okay. So the objectives of record keeping are to identify animals belonging to the school, to show evidence of proof of ownership, that indeed these animals do belong to the school and not to an individual that is keeping them on the school premises. Okay, so the records can be used as a management tool. They can be used to undertake performance evaluation. Are we making money? Are we losing? Okay, to perform genetic selection, to keep proper health records, because some of these things are a requirement in most enterprises. Okay, and also to accurately measure production and reproduction. Okay, so they also help to account for deaths and losses due to diseases, parasites, rustling, and predators. So they are also kept to perform other important management functions required to run an effective and efficient school, livestock, farm, enterprise. Okay, so moving on, still keeping with goats and sheep. So requirements for shelter of goats and sheep in terms of durability and cost effectiveness. Okay, so the requirements are that sheep and goat shelters should be strong enough to last a long time, be large enough for the number of animals to be accommodated comfortably, to allow freedom of movement for all animals. It should also be well drained, because sheep and goats do not tolerate muddy conditions. Therefore, yards and shelters should be built on well-drained ground. Okay, so these requirements continue on the next slide. Okay, so a sheep or goat structure should be easy to keep, well maintained, with dry bedding and easy to clean. It should be able to receive morning sunshine evenly. It should be well ventilated, and it should have low ammonia gas concentrations from waste materials. And it should also have suitable isolation pens for sick or injured animals. Okay, moving on with sheep and goat farming and marketing. Okay, so next is planning a shelter for sheep and goats. Okay, so this requires attention to the following housing features. Okay, so it matters where to locate the animal housing or sheds, the orientation, issues to deal with ventilation, what materials are going to use in your building your animal barn, the type of housing, so this consists of what type of roofing are you going to use, what type of walls are you going to have. Okay, there are also issues of space requirement as well as the production systems to be used. Is it going to be an intensive production setup, or is it going to be an outdoors thing? Okay, so what are now the reasons for ensuring ventilation systems in sheep and goat houses with raised floors? Okay, so raised slated floors have the following advantages. So there will be no need for bedding. Manure and urine and debris drop through the slated floors, making removal hassle-free. And this is a good way of removing a major source of disease and parasite infestation. Okay, so this is continued on the next slide. Okay, so when it comes to raised floors, there is less labor required to clean and also to maintain it, the structure. The floor generally remains relatively dry and clean. You can use less space requirements. Manure can be collected easily to fertilize crops on processing it for sale. Air passes through the slates, improving ventilation as well. So these are some of the advantages of having goat houses or sheep houses with raised floors. Okay, so it's also important that you study further and understand the advantages of partitioning a goat or sheep shelter. You also need to understand what a cash flow statement is and why it is important for farmers. Okay, so moving on to the next unit, which deals with fish. Okay, so the first item to be discussed is how to organize visits to the nearest dams, ponds, and aquariums. Okay, so if you want your learners to familiarize themselves with the natural environment of fish, maybe you need to visit a dam, an aquarium, a pond, somewhere in the vicinity, far away. So there are some of the things that you need to consider. Okay, so for example, initial planning. So you need to make sure that you read and understand the school's policy on trip. Okay, the school's policy on school trip procedures. Okay, you also need to cover yourself by following the procedures laid down by the organization of the school trips. So you need to get the trip authority well in advance. Okay, so you also need to ensure that you are aware of your legal or moral responsibilities as the party leader of the trip, as the organizers. What are your legal as well as moral responsibilities? You need to be aware of those. Okay, so these are not the only things to consider. More guidelines are outlined on pages 161 and 162 of your study guide. Okay, you also need to study and understand the things that you need to do during the trip to these aquariums. Okay, so here on this slide is just a brief overview of what to do when you are planning, but there are also things that you need to do while you are on the trip. These are also highlighted in your study guide and you need to know them. Okay, you also need to study and understand the functions of the different parts of the fish body. Why does it have a fin? Why does it have scales? You need to know those things. Okay, so continuing with fish farming. So how fish diseases may result from chemicals such as insecticides and herbicides or fertilizers. Okay, so here are some of the specific chemicals that are known to cause diseases in fish. So we have chemicals such as chlorine, heavy metals, addition of salt to the ponds, water pH, as well as contaminated water. Okay, all these items are capable of causing fish diseases. So you need to study them in detail and how they cause fish diseases. And this is outlined on pages 172 and 174 of your study guide. Okay, so moving on with fish. Now you have your fish, they are grown, they are ready for harvest. How do we do it? Okay, so there are a number of methods of harvesting fish. Okay, one, you can drain water from the pond. You use basket traps, using fish nets, using a hook, line and sinker. Also, a good harvesting technique is the one that makes it easier to produce good quality fish. Okay, so the aspects of fish harvesting continues in the next slide. Okay, so when it comes to fish farming, you need to read and understand the descriptions of the different fish harvesting methods listed above. Okay, so what is fish sink and hook? Okay, how do we do it using a net? What are the advantages of such? Okay, you need to read up on that. You also need to read and understand the advantages of the Namibian fishing industry, especially to the coastal towns. How does it contribute to the growth of these towns? Okay, and finally, you need to read and understand the important values that you as a teacher should be able to point out to your learners. Okay, so you need to study all those things and they are in your study guide. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this brief presentation on Agricultural Education 3. Once again, should you have any questions, please reach out to your tutor, which is me, Eric Ukule, on the contact details provided on page or slide 2 of this presentation at the prescribed hours of between 8 and 6 p.m. Okay, so in your preparation for examinations, make use of this presentation, your study guide, as well as your assignment. So those three things should guide you in your preparation for exam. So all the best for your upcoming examination, and I thank you.